This is the Four Principles, Season 1, Chapter 4. In this episode, we will be working backwards from digital modulation technology to the structures of consciousness. Specifically, we will be showing how quadrature amplitude modulation and orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, used in telecommunications technology, Wi-Fi, 5G, and quantum computers, is imposing our digital architecture on the multiverse. Quadrature amplitude modulation, shortened QAM, and orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, shortened OFDM, are two forms of telecommunications modulation designed to convert digital, binary, data into transmittable forms of information. I won't be going deeply into these techniques, but I would encourage any listeners to review the Wikipedia pages for QAM and OFDM, as they would assist with understanding this podcast episode. QAM is used in Wi-Fi technology to transmit data. It does this by transmitting on two channels using both sine and cosine curves. That is, a 4QAM describes four distinct binary terms, 00, 01, 10, 11, where 00 equals sine, 2 pi frequency time, plus cosine, 2 pi frequency time. 01 equals sine, 2 pi frequency time, minus cosine, 2 pi frequency time. 10 equals minus sine, 2 pi frequency time, plus cosine, 2 pi frequency time. And 11 equals minus sine, 2 pi frequency time, minus cosine, 2 pi frequency time. That is, 4QAM represents four binary values through different arrangements of sine and cosine. QAM is commonly used because it is easy to separate out signals. The other OFDM encodes the information in the frequency domain and then converts the signal to the time domain for transmission. QAM and OFDM are being used to develop quantum computers independently and in different ways. At this point in my explanation, I have to return to our discussion of the digital structures of consciousness. To return to Season 1, Chapter 3 of this podcast, when digital structures are in a state of emotional coupling, higher frequencies of that coupling, leading to resonance, produce longer spatial and temporal displacements of the subject in nonlinearity. That is, polarity, or preferential expectation matching induces short nonlinear intersections resulting in phase flips in a single impulse. These nonlinear intersections are of brief duration and limited spatial displacement. They are frequently focused on a single impulse and do not increase synchronicity between either nonlinear participant. However, at the other pole, when emotional coupling leads to higher frequency phase flips, and most postural releases are coupled and do not provoke nonlinear intersections, the ones that do involve more involved experiences with numerous impulses flipping phase, over the course of hours, days or months, lost to the experience of the subject of the intersection. Likewise, when emotional coupling persists despite phase flips, leading to higher frequency resonance, the amount of information represented by that structure is compressed. As members of the structure, can be described by a common frequency pertaining to affirmation of a particular impulse. We can liken nonlinearity in cases of emotional coupling to OFDM, where information is preserved in the frequency of the emotional coupling and nonlinear intersection, induced phase flips, preserved in the time domain. Whereas the polarity of preferential expectation matching, or hierarchical priority, is revealed in the polarity of the digital labeling of QAM, and the positive and negative arrangement of the sinusoidal components. Likewise, OFDM, by preserving information in the time domain, permits echoes, déjà vu, and time spreading to achieve a diversity gain, signal-to-noise ratio improvement. That is, the top pole of nonlinearity is described by the tautological flow, where the trendsetter, who has already acquiesced to an impulse acts out that impulse for the second, who negates it, and so on and so forth. The top pole of nonlinearity is thus defined by expression of all impulses both in the confines of nonlinearity and within linearity through the tautological flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel. Finally, we see that both poles of nonlinearity ultimately filter what present becomes the past. The top pole tends toward diversity gain, improving the consistency of the digital stream by making nonlinear phase flips unnecessary. Whereas, the bottom pole merely preserves hierarchical priority without improvement of the signal-to-noise ratio. That is, it doesn't eliminate nonlinear intersections in the digital stream. However, the linearity of the stream determines the information transmission rate of that digital stream. Now, what is meant by digital stream? The digital stream is the quantization of the impulses expressed in any hierarchically or tautologically connected structures. For example, in previous episodes we talked about sequential substitution events. These are reverse substitution events followed by substitution events. Reverse substitution events are where acquiescence is followed by negation. Substitution events are where negation is followed by acquiescence. They describe two different forms and a basic vocabulary of arrangements. A reverse substitution event sees an digital structure converted into an analog structure. A substitution event sees an analog structure converted to a digital structure. Thus, what is actually observed when perusing the Internet is the digital stream having passed through a sequential substitution event. That is, impulse 1 is acquiesced to then negated at the conclusion of the reverse substitution event. This leads to an analog structure where that impulse flips phase and becomes affirmed again along with a phase flip in a bodily rhythm or cycle. But also in this analog structure is the reactive impulse of the hierarchically lower in priority. At the conclusion of the substitution event, that negated impulse is affirmed in a new digital structure with its not set. Thus, sequential substitution results in the transformation of one's internally acquiesced to impulse into a reactionary impulse oriented around the lower in hierarchical priority, in digital form. Tautologically, the negated impulse at the conclusion of reverse substitution becomes the affirmed impulse in the analog structure, which becomes the affirmed impulse at the conclusion of the substitution event with its not set. Thus, we know when there is a shift in our digital stream that it was caused by a hierarchical nonlinear intersection. But to return to our discussion of QAM and OFDM, it is my belief that these forms of modulation are being imposed on adjacent parallel universes through quantum computation, which is impacting quantum interference between universes resulting in nonlinear intersections. That's the end of the podcast for today.